conversation. I guess we can do a little more of that later, perhaps. Good morning. How about this wild weather, at least at our place, rolling thunder? I thought of that hymn, hear the rolling thunder. It just went on and on. It was pretty boisterous out where we live. As most of you know, our boiler's being replaced, so we hope to have it installed in time for the changing weather. So I think we timed it pretty well. The new one's bigger and not configured the same as the other one, so they had to basically tear everything out in there and start fresh. And now I love tools. I know some of you do also. And to me, there's really no better feeling than finding just the right tool for the job, when you're in a tight spot. Oh yeah, I've got that tool and I can take care of that. Although I have been accused and am guilty of using a pipe wrench for a hammer once in a while or a chisel for a pry tool. You do what you got to do. But as I've been checking in on the installation of the boiler, I've been kind of impressed, really impressed by the tools those guys are using to cut and solder all the pipes and get them in the right angles to install it, and the electrical work, all the conduits and everything. And then just yesterday, I was out at the Yamhill Valley Heritage Center and saw all types of vintage tools that they used back in the day for the sawmill or in farming and in a blacksmith shop. So all this kind of tool theme had me flashing back on a sermon, a memorable sermon presented here at Reedwood many years ago by my wife, Janine, in which she showed a number of tools from one of her dad's toolboxes. And she talked about how each tool was created for a purpose. There was one tool, though, that she didn't know what it was used for. But one person did. You remember Jess Sudel? A number of us do. He was an amazing guy, and he knew what that tool was for, and he knew how to use it. And afterward, he went up to Janine and explained its use and shared his knowledge with her. But as was put forth in Janine's message, just as it's true about tools, I do believe that each of us has a purpose, with tools or gifts to be brought out of the toolbox and put to use. Now, some people may appear to be kind of like the Leatherman tool, where they've got lots of abilities, or Swiss Army knife, and others of us perhaps feel a little less capable, perhaps, but we all have gifts that we can share. We all can be listeners. We all can be encouragers. We all can lend a hand in some way when someone has a need. I really love being at Reedwood. It's such a great place to sharpen our tools and perhaps acquire some new ones. So let us continue to engage with this gifted community and look for ways to put our tools to good use. I'll offer a word of prayer. Gracious God, thank you for the opportunities we have to gather together here, both in person and online. I'm grateful to be here, and I look forward to this time of learning, sharing, and listening as we open our hearts to receive a word from you. Bless our time together today, I ask in your Son's name. Amen.
Scripture for today is from the book of Daniel, chapter 5, verses 1 through 24. King Darius reorganized his kingdom. Sounds like a good American. He appointed 120 governors to administer all the parts of his realm. Over them were 3 vice regents who made sure that everything was in order for the king. But Daniel, brimming with spirit and intelligence, so completely outclassed the other vice regents and governors that the king decided to put him in charge of the whole kingdom. The vice regents and governors got together to find some old scandal or skeleton in Daniel's life that they could use against him, but they couldn't dig up anything. He was totally exemplary and trustworthy. The vice regents and governors conspired together and then went to the king and said, "King Darius, live forever." I wonder if they really meant that. For the next 30 days, no one is to pray to any god or mortal except you, O king. Anyone who disobeys will be thrown into the lion's den. Issue this decree, O king, and make it unconditional, as if written in stone, like all the laws of the Medes and the Persians. King Darius signed the decree. When Daniel learned that the decree had been signed and posted, he continued to pray, just as he had always done. The conspirators came and found him praying, asking God for help. They went straight to the king and reminded him of the royal decree. At this, the king was very upset, tried his best to get Daniel out of the fix he'd put him in. He worked at it the whole day long. The conspirators came, but then the conspirators were back. Remember, O king, it's the law of the Medes and the Persians that the king's decree can never be changed. The king caved and ordered Daniel brought and thrown into the lion's den. But he said to Daniel, "Your God, to whom you are so loyal, is going to get you out of this one." A stone slab was placed over the opening of the den. The king sealed the cover with his signet ring and the signet rings of all of his nobles, fixing Daniel's fate. The king then went back to his palace. He refused supper. He could not sleep. He spent the night fasting. At daybreak, the king got up and hurried to the lion's den. As he approached the den, he called out anxiously, "Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you are served so loyally, saved you from the lions?" "O king, live forever," said Daniel. "My God sent his angel who closed the mouths of the lions so that they would not hurt me. I've been found innocent before God and also before you, O king. I have done nothing to harm you." When the king heard these words, he was happy. He ordered Daniel taken out of the den. When he was hauled up, there was not a scratch on him. He had trusted his God. Then the king commanded that the conspirators who had informed on Daniel be thrown into the lion's den.
got us. That's story number 6, and in the book of Daniel. The book of Daniel continues on another 6 chapters. If you want to read it for yourself, go for it. We're going to conclude here. This will be our final look at these cycles of stories in this great book. And, there's, what's funny is, this is kind of like the summer of Daniel stories. Just 2 weeks ago, we had Levi and Deborah Frazier dramatize kind of the behind-the-scenes side of this story. Then in our Illuminate Bible study, there was the lesson on this story, and now I'm preaching on it. So it's kind of like this threefold approach to Daniel chapter 6. Let me start in a different area here first, though. There are 3 letters that each one of us will know that they are synonymous with what it means to have to wait. I'll say these 3 letters. DMV. DMV. You get ready to wait. I was just there last week because I was going to be preaching on the topic of waiting. I want to talk about waiting this morning. And I thought I'd pay attention to how people were handling waiting there at the DMV. So, if you're going to be waiting at the DMV, you might as well play a game, right? It's like, okay, well, I'm going to make a game out of this. You can't get out of it. So how can we make the best of this? So as I was, kind of subtly, maybe not so subtly, watching what people were doing there while they were waiting, as can be expected, there was a lot of this. We all do this, or many of us do this. There was a lot of the being zoned out on their phones, while I was also looking around at people seated. The others were relaxed, those that were seated. Some had their eyes shut. They could be in prayer, or they could be really asleep. I think a couple of them were actually sleeping as their heads were starting to go down, or they were going into deep prayer. It was kind of like maybe a silent worship time. I don't know. Then there were some that looked like they were convinced that they should not have to wait. They wanted to let everyone know that they did not have to wait. They should not have to wait. It was just in their body language, their posture. Their faces expressed frustration, impatience, and even anger. How dare I have to wait? I found that interesting, just kind of using, taking some time to have that case study, to see people being forced to wait. What was going to be their reaction? There's another word that I find that inherently carries with it the work of waiting, not just DMV. The word faith. Faith inherently means that you're going to wait. You have to wait. However, this faith is not a passive, unthinking, distractible waiting, but rather an active attending to what's happening now on the inside of me. And this isn't just an inward gaze to have to wait, but there's also a kind of a simultaneous awareness and interpretation of what's happening around the world that I find myself in the present moment. So faith is the inward gaze of what's happening inside, but it's also the outward gaze of, okay, what's happening in the lives, in the world, in the relationships around me. It's a two-way way of seeing the world. What's happening inside? How do I interpret what's happening around me? It's one way of seeing faith as waiting. When we wait, we are cooperating with the Spirit's searching of our hearts, with the Spirit's searching of our motives, with the Spirit's searching of our most deep desires. Is the Spirit allowed to go there? Do you know why you do what you do? Do you consider, why am I this way? Why do I think this way? Do I know that? We open ourselves and allow this searching, this self-searching. Or as the psalmist writes in their experience in the 139th chapter, Lord, you have searched me and you know me, verse 1. So there is this work of searching, there's this work of waiting within that time. I desire to be transparent with you this morning. It has been an emotionally draining week this week for me. I'm sure partly because the women of my house are out of the country, touring Ireland and Scotland. The dogs may have been just a little bit more needy during this time. The cats are beyond hope at this point. I can't help them. I don't know what the cats want from me anymore. I'm down to the point of taking pictures of them and sending them to my daughter asking for help. Also, you should know, just this morning, Megan sent me a photo of their brunch while they are presently in Edinburgh. Tea and scones with clotted cream and raspberry preserves. I was going to put this picture on a PowerPoint, but I didn't want to tempt you. I must be honest, too. My breakfast this morning was a day-old muffin, microwaved day-old coffee, and this seemed to turn to sawdust in my mouth after having seen that picture. I almost took a picture of it to send back, but then I said, no, I'm not going to do that. That could be interpreted as a little jab. I don't want to do that. More honestly, there are some personal items in my life right now that I've been holding in the light, and for this, I appreciate your prayers for me. Thank you. I share this with you because of an opening that the Lord has been, that I've been recurrently having at this time. That word has been specific to the message of wait upon the Lord. Wait upon the Lord, Mark. We've all heard this phrase before, wait upon the Lord. Okay, yeah, sure. All right, no problem. Got it. Next. We see it in Scripture. We hear and sing of it in song. We literally practice waiting upon the Lord week to week together, as we will do here in a few minutes, as we sit in silence in hope of the Spirit's movement, searching, and we are attentive to the spoken word of our meetings vocal ministry. That is an expression, a literal, obedient interpretation and acting on wait upon the Lord. The basis of our worship, after the manner of friends, could be a literal interpretation of that. This week, I could say that it's been somewhat of a mantra for me to wait upon the Lord. And I've come to a couple of revelations about this that I would like to share of what it means. What does that mean when we say that? What does that mean when we read that? What does that mean when we sing that? Wait upon the Lord. It's a couple things. First, I hold the tension in my approach to this. I hold the tension of how I understand and I don't understand what this phrase means. I understand it as much as I don't understand it. I understand it in the practical, literal sense of maybe being physically still, having a posture of openness and reception. However, this seems to be a surface kind of level one approach to the interpretation. I intuitively sense that it means more than just that, to physically do it. Okay, that's one side of it. Perhaps waiting upon the Lord means that I begin again the slow, painful work of a self-surrender, of revisiting that. To critically view my tendency to move towards self-preservation for myself and my life, almost without acting and thinking, I will move towards self-preservation. To critically view that and to say, why am I doing that, and is that right? To not cooperate with my pride or my ego, that is part of what it means to wait upon the Lord, and even to be open to new revelation and to be willing to scrutinize my own understanding of what I think ought to be, to scrutinize that. Maybe in this case, it would be a sign of faithfulness to allow some room even for doubt on things that I would say that I have no doubt. Maybe some doubt would be healthy and good in this case. So there is a shedding of an outer layer of myself that is necessary if I am to attentively wait. Such waiting is when we consider the measure of who we think we are in the light of God's presence. I'll read that again. Such waiting is when we consider the measure of who we think we are in light of God's presence. In the last couple of lessons in the book of Daniel, let's bring it back there. In the last couple of lessons of the book of Daniel, I decided to pull out one theme. What is the overarching theme of some of these stories? To pull out the theme from the narratives that many of us know so well. It's almost like revisiting Sunday school when we hear these stories. We've known these stories for a long, long time. What does it mean now today? What is it trying to communicate? What does that have to do with my life today? It goes beyond just learning the facts or learning the details of the story. How does it speak and communicate to me here and now? This week, the last and sixth story really does save the best for last. It's probably the most well-known story, Daniel in the Lion's Den. I think one of the primary lessons of this chapter is the exemplary demonstration of how Daniel was a master at waiting for the Lord, upon the Lord, even in the face of certain death. Daniel understood the spiritual secret to wait upon God, the giver of deliverance and the bringer of salvation. And as I kind of listen and revisit that story, I'm sure that Daniel, when he was thrown into the den, expected to be martyred. He didn't expect what happened to happen. That's part of the miracle. That's the unexpected. That's the plot twist that we maybe we expect. But putting yourself in his shoes, in his context, in his experience, he did not know that was going to happen. He expected martyrdom. He didn't know what was going to happen to him. But to wait upon the Lord doesn't mean that we do away with uncertainty, but rather we live in a state of hope in the midst of uncertainty. When we wait upon God, we are saying, my life no longer needs to be about me only and what I can do on my strength, but instead I will trust in the Creator. I will trust in my God. For Daniel, it was trusting in his God to whom he prayed 3 times a day, despite the plot and despite what King Darius had given. One of my favorite sayings of Jesus goes something like this: try to keep your life, and you will lose it. Give up your life for my sake, and it will be kept. This saying appears both in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. I don't think it shows up in John, but we might want to ask Paul for that. It pops up there in all 3 of those synoptic gospels. So it is with waiting upon the Lord, how there is a paradox at work whenever we're doing that. Whenever we do the necessary work of our lives, when we attend to God first, in a certain sense, it's a 2-for-1 deal. In willfully giving up our lives, we're trading in what is our false self for that which is our true self. This is the self that only God can give to us. When we are willing to trade in what is false about ourselves, that is when we receive what is true about ourselves from our source and creator, God. Daniel was a master at understanding this, and he took that with him into the lion's den. He took that with him into all of these other kind of stories that we read, that we may be thinking of, well, those are nursery rhyme stories, or those are myths, or those are things that, you know, those are lessons that I learned as a kid, but now that I'm adult, you know, maybe I don't need them. I think the stories of Daniel are life stories in that we can continually revisit them and learn the lesson that they are trying to communicate. Be willing to wait and trade in who it is you think you are on your own for that which only God can give us. So again, I say to you, friends, wait upon the Lord. My queries for our time of open worship are this. For you, what does it mean for you to wait upon the Lord? I shared a little bit about what it means to me. For you today, what does that mean for you? What has been your experience with that? What has it brought you? Has it been a source of comfort or disappointment? A source of solace? A source of frustration? What does it mean to wait upon the Lord? Has it brought faith? Has it nurtured hope? And has it grown love in you? I think faith, hope, and love, that ought to be the outcome when we're doing it. But it won't come without some sort of self-dying, some sort of very real and present real-time risk That's how these things come. Not when we fake it, but when we actually do it. What does it mean for you to wait upon the Lord? Let us attend and sink down into that place of attending to the inward teacher. Carol has a microphone if you are moved to speak during this time of open worship and vocal ministry. Friends online, if you feel moved to share in vocal ministry, make sure you are unmuted. Let us center down, friends.